So, hello and welcome to Run Fast, Lift Heavy. Today I'm joined by Kloe Gibson. Kloe, thank you for taking the time to come on.
Oh, thank you for asking me. Excited to talk about this with you today.
No worries. So, normally I do some warm up questions for my guests. So, because the podcast is called Run Fast, Lift Heavy, I want to know if you prefer running fast or lifting heavy.
Running fast, obviously.
Yeah.
The joys of being a triathlete.
Next question, leg day or arm day?
Arms. I feel
Yeah,
like
me
getting up
too.
the body. Yeah, I think it's more
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, and legs, you just can't walk for the next week or so.
Yeah, that's it. You're just stuck. And I think with all the cycling and running I do, I'm like, oh, I train enough legs, let's do a bit of upper.
Yeah. Great. Okay. You do triathlons, so swimming or cycling?
Cycling. That's easy.
S- and cycling or running?
Cycling. Cycling's my number one.
Really?
I love it. Yeah, it's my thing. I go through different phases. Like sometimes I love running.
Yeah.
Sometimes not very often swimming is my number one, but cycling pretty much always is. Depends how I feel that week.
Good stuff. So, okay, next question. If you could design a birthday a birthday workout, what three movements would be in that workout and why?
Sprints definitely. I love doing like faster interval sprints just because
Yeah.
something I do very, very often. Something really random actually is a ski erg. Love the ski erg. It's one of my
Yeah.
favourite things to use in the gym. So a bit of a random mix here, but three did you say?
Yeah, three. One more.
One more. Oh, that is difficult, but I do like a good squat. I just think they're quite fun. So maybe like squats overhead press, make it a little bit more exciting.
Nice. That sounds like a good workout.
Sounds fun. I mean, I'm sure it'd be interesting to do, but
So before we get into the rest of the conversation, I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about what you do, who you are, where you're from, all of the good stuff.
yeah. So born and bred in Scotland, lived here all my life. Where my family are from. So I am a triathlete. So started off like when I was quite young, doing a lot of running. My family was very much like the sporty family. Growing
Yeah.
up, so like anything like my parents done, any kind of sports going, me and my brother were kind of forced into it as such, but not forced, but more like okay, you're going to do it too, which I'm very grateful for now. So started off doing quite a lot of endurance running from a very young age. I kind of knew that I liked the challenges, the kind of harder sort of thing.
Hmm.
My dad's done quite a few very hard marathons actually. He's a very good marathon runner. So kind of fell in love with the kind of distance, the endurance. I started off doing some of that, and then took a few years out of kind of sport, and then one day fell back into it. My dad wants to do a few more marathons. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it with you. And then one thing led to another, and I kind of fell into Ironman, triathlon, basically through watching a video. I saw a video of someone kind of talking about it, and I knew what triathlon was, obviously, as most people do, but I didn't really know to the
Hmm.
extent of how extreme an Ironman was. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing this video of this guy talking about it and how there were people collapsing at the finish line, and there was like paramedics everywhere, and everyone was like dying, and I was just like, I want to do that, and I don't know why. It's
Yeah.
just like the whole wire differently thing. I do think kind of relates to me. My mind is a little bit crazy. But I like the challenges, and then fell into Ironman triathlons. So that's what I do now. That's what I compete in, and that is my main focus. And all my goals are based in that as well.
So how many Ironmans have you done?
Three.
Wow. So what time did it take you to do it? I know it's a full day event.
It is, yeah, it's a long day. I mean, depending on the course, but I feel like for the kind of average person, it can take like 14, kind of 15 hours. My first one I done in 12. Um,
Hmm.
and then I have done a few half Ironmans as well, which is super cool. Actually, racing next weekend, which is fun
Oh, awesome. Where is that going to be?
in Mallorca. So nice and warm.
Yeah, lovely. Bit different to Scotland.
Yeah, but my first Ironman was in well, half Ironman was in Scotland, and the weather was crazy.
But I
Never
guess it's
again.
more I guess it's more motivation to finish it.
I mean, yeah, most certainly. It makes it a challenge as well, especially having the hills around here. Even though you like a
Yeah.
challenge, I am partial to a flat course. Flat and
Mm.
fast is what I like.
Yeah. So I'd love to know what actually goes into training for an Ironman, because you said that the race is 12 hours, but there's only so many hours in a day. So I can't imagine that you're training, 12 hours a day. So how many hours do you train for? What do your splits look like?
Yes, I mean, this can kind of differ very much per person depending on what your goals are in the sport. Like, I have quite a lot of goals that I want to achieve in the next few years, so my training's pretty intense. So for coming into race week, I'm a little bit taken right now, but my last few weeks have been about like 22 hours a week. So that is
Mm.
Monday to Friday, broken up with like 4 swims. And then we have a few runs, a couple harder runs, a couple longer runs. Weekends typically like long kind of aerobic things, so like long rides.
Yeah.
Saturdays, Sundays, long runs, and a few kind of gym sessions in there as well. Like I do a couple of CrossFit sessions a week, just because I find it fun. I don't know how I
Yeah.
manage to find time, but I do. And then just some strength and conditioning focus. So each week kind of varies. The structure is pretty similar, but typically about like 22 hours at the moment I'm training a week.
So how many miles are you covering per aspect of the sport? So how many swimming, cycling, and running miles would you say?
So through, I mean, kilometers. I work in kilometers. Miles, no idea, I'm afraid. But through swimming, anywhere between like 10 and kind of 15 kilometers. 15 like a
Yeah.
very good week. Cycling again can be up to 200. Again, depending on where you are in the kind of year in the season. This is just kind of me at the moment. And then running, probably don't run any more than like 40 kilometers a week. My running's pretty minimal just due to injury. Not
Hmm.
ideal. And also with cross training as well, with obviously triathlon, I think you don't need to do as much running as what you think you do, even if you are running a
Yeah.
marathon at the end of the Ironman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely good for injury prevention. I can imagine the strength training element to it.
Of course, yeah, it's so important.
Yeah. So do you work with a coach? Do you have
I
someone writing
do.
your sessions?
Yes, I work with a few coaches actually. So I've got a strength and conditioning coach who does all of my kind of rehab, prehab for my injury things, and my strength based sessions, and he is incredible. And then I work with two tri coaches as well that do my main triathlon kind of structuring.
Great. So you're training for 22 hours a day. What are you doing for work? How do you fit it in?
Yeah, I feel like my life is just non-stop. So I actually coach other athletes as
Sorry,
well, which is super cool.
22 hours a week. I
Oh
said
yeah,
22 hours a day.
that would be dedication if I trained
Yeah.
22 hours a day. Hats off if anyone does. So I coach other athletes as well, which is super cool. So one, this was kind of very new, like in the last kind of few months, I decided to start my own business, just from a bad experience I had with the coach, and I've been studying for the last couple of years. So coach other athletes as well, but all online remote coaching. So it's handy with
Hmm.
like be flexible with my working hours to fit in with my training as well.
Yeah. So what type of clients do you work with? Is it purely for triathlons or do you do general pop?
No, mainly actually runners. So the majority of my clients are training for marathons. That's the kind of where it comes down. I do a few triathlons, triathletes, sorry, as well. But running's my main. That's like where my background is too. And so in
Hmm.
running, that's why I just coach mostly.
So I've got a question for you, and I know a lot of people may have mental blocks with running. You know, it's something that's is really difficult, but I know that when you do get into it, you can stick with it and improve quickly. But what advice would you give to someone who perhaps wants to run their first 5K but doesn't know where to start?
I think the main thing is to try and follow some sort of structured program. I think
Yeah.
having a you can go out and you can try and run as far as you want, but if you have a goal in mind, it's so much easier when you have steps along the way. So it's like, okay, so we start here and we do this a
Hmm.
few times, then we can get to here. So having a goal in mind, not putting too much pressure on yourself and just going out and enjoying it. And one thing that everyone does, I do it myself, I have done it myself, is with running, is you have to slow down to be able to run faster. I think so many people think that every time you go out, especially with like 5Ks, okay, I'm gonna go out and run as fast as I can. I want to PR every time, but like it doesn't work like that because you're gonna burn yourself out, you're gonna get injuries, and it's not sustainable. So it's just taking it
Hmm.
easy as well and enjoying it. So if that means sometimes when you're starting off you have to walk. If you have to walk every few minutes, then do that.
Yeah.
Like it's not the end of the world. So just taking it easy.
Yeah.
I think is the most important thing.
I used to swim and I always had a love-hate relationship with running. I just found it unnatural and I was so all or nothing. So I'd go out, give it my absolute all, and then after 5 minutes I'd have to stop. So the biggest thing for me is I just gave in on my ego and did the couch to 5K, and it was brilliant because it was just 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and then each week we got progressively harder, and that was a winner for me.
I think it's the easiest thing to do as well. You really have to build up your aerobic base, which you're not going to do if you go like maximum every time. I
Yeah.
think you can relate to saying that you do all or nothing. I'm literally exactly the same. Like when I come back from injury, I find it very difficult to slow down because I just want to run fast and go, but it's like
Yeah.
no, take a step back and just take it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So you mentioned having an unpleasant um, event happened with a former coach. Could you explain what happened with that and what your experience was?
Yeah, so a few years ago, when I decided I wanted to take my running quite seriously again, I took a few years out and I wasn't really racing or doing anything, just kind of living life, enjoying myself. And I decided I was going to do an ultra marathon. So I reached out to a coach who was very local to me and had a very good reputation. He'd worked with quite a lot of people that I kind of knew, hadn't heard much bad. So reached out to him and I was training with him. So we were doing a lot of like in-person coaching. So it wasn't all remote coaching. It was
Mm-hmm.
in person as well because he was very local to me. And then from that, I didn't. This may sound really bizarre because I was about 19 at the time I reached out to him. But like tracking calories was something that I had never considered in my life. It was never something I thought about. Like I ate what I want when I wanted.
Yeah.
I've always ate intuitively. And it's never something I've ever thought about. And he kind of introduced kind of a calorie sort of target to hit, and we started tracking calories and tracking macros a little bit. And bearing in mind I was training for an ultra marathon, so I was running up to 120 kilometers each week, and I was being told to eat between 12 and 1500 calories, along with
Wow.
strength training about 4 times a week as well. And looking back at it now, I think like how stupid was I to think that was okay. But because I had no knowledge in calories, so again, it was never something I
Mm.
thought about it. Like I've never worked with any coaches that had mentioned things like that before, and I did, and I listened to him, and for the next kind of couple of years, it was very toxic. So every time we had a session, he was weighing me, and if I'd put on like half a kilogram, it would be like you're snacking too much, or you need to watch
Wow.
this. Like, what have you been doing? And yeah, it was very, very bad. Like my relationship with food became awful. And I think the hardest part about that is if you'd said to me the year prior, like this was going to happen, I was going to be in a situation, I would have laughed in
Mm.
your face. It's like my relationship
Yeah.
was absolutely fine. So yeah, that went on for about a year until I kind of one day kind of realized like I think there's a bit of an issue there. Like there's
Mm.
something not right. Like I'm constantly thinking about food. I'm constantly hungry. I'd have these mad binges, and it was just kind of back and forth. And then lockdown obviously came, and there was no scales because no one was really seeing each other, but we still had kind of contact, and I still kind of doing some training things with him like online, so I was still working with him quite a lot. And I remember when the scale came back out, I think it put on I think about 10 to 15 kilograms. And I mean I'm quite small, so obviously that could be quite a lot, but it was mainly just like healthy, like it wasn't
Yeah.
fat,
Yeah.
like it was
Yeah.
just healthy. And his reaction was fucking hell, what have you done?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that was just kind of the drawing point for me. And then from there, like my relationship with food didn't heal that quickly. I do think it's a lot. It's not just
Mm.
a one day you decide like I'm going to be healthy again. It is a long-winded kind of process. And even though I'm on the other side of it, it really terrifies me that there's people in the world that think it's okay to do that and that get away with it as well.
Mm. Yeah, we were speaking about it before how anyone can go online, create an Instagram account, and can just proclaim themselves as an online coach. You don't need,
Um,
I mean, I don't know if this person did have qualifications, but you don't actually need to have them. And that's really worrying.
Very worrying, yeah, most certainly. I just think I don't also understand how a person, if you have no qualifications, you feel qualified enough to
Yeah.
do some aspects of it to teach other
Yeah.
people. But yeah, so that was my
Yeah.
my very interesting experience with a very bad coach. So I hope that no one ever experiences that, but sadly it does happen.
Mm. So, how did you go about rebuilding your relationship with food and with your body?
I think, I mean, like I said, it was a very long-winded process. It was just kind of for a few months after, like I went into this extreme hunger phase, and I was always
Hmm.
hungry, just constantly eating. And I remember kind of looking in the mirror and just thinking, like, I look really strong, like I look fit, like I'm running faster than I was before, and I'd taken up triathlon at this time as well. So I was cycling and I was swimming a lot too. I just felt like the fittest I've ever been, and then felt really positive until like a few months on, like this kind of extreme hunger phase kept going on, and I would occasionally weigh myself, and it's like, okay, wow, like there's quite a big difference to what I am now. And then obviously those kind of
Hmm.
thoughts were still in the back of my head, even though they never came from me. Like it wasn't myself that made myself feel this way, it was someone else's work, someone else's actions that made me feel the way I did. It was still kind of in the back of my mind. And I very, very quickly kind of fell back into a very restrictive cycle again, a very unhealthy cycle.
Mm.
So through that, what I'd done was I actually told some of my friends what was going on, because if I tell other people, like it's going to make me accountable. And
Yeah.
then the ultimate kind of thing that switched in my head too is I have a lot of goals within Ironman within the sport that I do. And I was like, I can't go on and I'm not going to achieve these goals if I'm not fueling myself properly.
Yeah.
And then a couple of months, it was kind of back and forth, jumping between these two thoughts in between my heads until I was just like, I went to see a podiatrist about one of the injuries that I had, and he had said to me, this injury, it was a bone injury that basically stemmed from underfueling, overtraining. And he said to me, he's like, if you undereat for like 100 calories a day, doesn't sound like very much, does it? But 100 calories over 6 months' time is a hell of a lot. And that's when you're not
Mm.
giving your body what you need to. And that honestly was like a switch in my head. And like since then, I have never like thought about trying to eat too little or trying to restrict myself in any way, shape, or form. And it was just kind of focusing on my goals and kind of the future and how what I'm doing to myself. I'm literally killing myself. I'm not getting anywhere from what I'm doing. And that's
Yeah.
how I kind of switched the flip flick the switch in my head.
Yeah. So when you first started with the coach and you started restricting your calories, were you feeling hungry when you were training, or was it just like, did you just block the thought that there could be something wrong with it?
It was more after. I think when you're running, like it's such like obviously exercise can be an appetite suppressant anyway. You don't always feel hungry like straight
Mm.
afterwards or when you're doing it, but when you're running, so like my dad and I, 'cause this was a lot of the time was in lockdown, we were doing like 3 half marathons a week sometimes. So I would kind
Wow.
of get back from that, and obviously you're burning actually like 2,000 calories just from that run alone, like not even including your base metabolic rate. So I'd come back and I would just be absolutely starving. Like all I could think
Mm.
about was what I was going to eat, but I was trying not to because I was being told I shouldn't be eating. And it was, yeah, this very toxic cycle I got stuck into.
Yeah. So you touched on having a race in Mallorca,
Yeah.
and you've also spoken about having big goals within the sport of Ironman and triathlons. What are
Yeah.
some of your goals?
Goals in the next few years. So, this is not one thing I talk about very much. My goals actually. Not I don't talk about it, not to other people. But goals for the next race. So I came my last triathlon I came third. Sorry, my second last
Hmm.
swim came third. My last half Ironman I came second. So this one,
Hmm.
I mean, it's quite obvious what the goal is. I
Yeah.
mean, the goal's always to win, but as long as I feel like I've given my all in the day, and I've given everything I can, I've left everything out there, like I will be satisfied as such. So to win my
Mm.
age group is the goals from this. This is a half Ironman I'm doing next weekend. It's not the full distance, and
Yeah.
then I'm racing the full distance later on in the year. And my goal for that again is to win and then qualify for the World Championships, and then go to the World Championships, and again work my ass off and
Yeah.
win there too. That is for the next few years. Like everything I do is around that goal. Like Kona is like the kind of ultimate event for triathletes. It's
Yeah.
the World Championships for full distance Ironman, and that is the goal to go there and win.
It's absolutely unbelievable. I've watched so many Kona documentaries, and I'm a big fan of Lucy Charles Barkley.
Oh yeah,
She's
she's
just,
incredible.
yeah, she's brilliant, and yeah, I mean, the scenery just looks absolutely unbelievable. I love all the divisions that are there. Yeah, it's great.
It's hot.
So
I
yeah,
mean, it is
very hot.
very, very warm, but yeah, it's such a beautiful island. Even just kind of what the locals do for the event and stuff, like it's absolutely incredible. And it is, like
Yeah.
I said, just like the main event for every triathlon, for every triathlete. So it's
Yeah.
hard work
So
for that this year.
I'd love to know what's going through your head when you are competing, because 12 hours is a long time, and I'm sure that you're in the pain cave for most of that time. So how are you getting yourself through it?
Yeah, it's dark. I'm not gonna lie. The majority of the time I'm racing, I don't actually enjoy it. And there's moments. It sounds so messed up, but like there is moments that I'm like, oh, this is quite fun. I feel okay, but
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm not there just to complete to complete it. Like I'm there to do well. Like I'm there to race. So I think it's
Mhm.
almost putting yourself like I'm always in that uncomfortable kind of zone. But you get to some dark places. Like you can go to some really dark places when you're on the course because it can be lonely. You're not allowed to headphones, live music. It's just you, obviously, other competitors around you. And it's just kind of thinking like, okay, for me, I always kind of envision like the finish line. And that is, I
Mhm.
would do honestly 5 Ironmans just to run across that finish line for 10 seconds. That is the best feeling in the world. So throughout the race, every time I start to feel like I'm struggling or start to feel like
Mhm.
I don't feel very good, it's just thinking like, okay, you can deal with this. You've been in situations like this before. You can do it, and just think about the kind of end goal. And that's how I always get through the
Yeah.
races. And I have this
And
motto with my dad. It's like, unless you die, the race gets finished. Like,
yeah.
there's no question about it.
Yeah. Okay, so then in terms of intra-race nutrition, are you drinking carbohydrates throughout? How do you fuel yourself the night before as well?
Yeah, so kind of week leading up to it, I don't necessarily agree with like carb loading so much the week leading up to it. I think just eat
Mm-hmm.
normal, like I wouldn't say eat more, but a few days prior, just kind of cut down the fiber a little bit. Obviously, it's a long day out, your stomach can go through a lot of things. So just cut down the fiber a few days before, lots of like still like making sure you're eating enough carbs, and then on the day, um, gels, everything is gels. I probably could stomach food, but gels are just so much easier because you can put them in your bottles
Mm.
on the bike, and then you can just kind of mark how often you need to drink it. So yes, lots of carbs in the gels. So I try to tolerate between like 60 to 80 grams of carbs an hour.
Okay. And then this might be TMI, but how do you go to the toilet? How does it how does that happen?
So
Because I mean I can imagine for the swim that's like the easiest part. Just but I know that I can't swim and go for a wee. So
could
yeah,
you not? Could you not think you could easily do
no.
it
Well,
somehow?
no, I can, but I can't be kicking my legs. I've tried I've tried many
Yes,
ways to do it.
shame for the person behind you if you're not kicking the leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lots of people actually ask me this, and it's kind of a running joke between like my friends that like I pee myself all the time. Like I don't, but if you're in a race, you need to pee. Like you're not going to stop and go. There is like
No.
portages in the transition areas, but the majority of athletes just do it as they're racing. So whether you're on the bike, whether you're running, or whether you're swimming, you just go. And
Just
it's
no
one of these
shame.
things. Yeah, it's one of these things that you have to. I think you have to train yourself to do because it's not very. You can't just go into a race and just think, "I've never done the toilet on the bike before, but today's going to be the day I'm going to do it." And I remember when I was first training for my first one, actually, because my first triathlon was a half Ironman. I've never actually done like sprint or standard distance. I went straight to the hard stuff. My dad kept saying to me, he was like, "You need to like practice. Like you're going to need to practice when you're out on the bike, like training. Because you can't just do it." And the first time I came back, I said to him, "Like, Dad, I've done it." And he's like, "I'm so proud of you." And I was like, "Wow, my family is just crazy." Yeah,
So
it's a little bit disgusting, but everyone does it.
so when you cross the finish line, what will be your post-race meal?
So actually, I always imagined like having like pizzas and like chips and stuff, just like loads and loads of carbs. But typically afterwards, I'm never that hungry.
Mm,
So I mean, ideally, like a big pizza is like the way to my heart. Like that is what I want. But normally, you're not like I can never stomach anything for a few hours after, and even when at that kind of night, it's like my body's still in a bit of obviously you're putting yourself through like a lot of strain that day, and like your
yeah,
stomach's
yeah.
a little bit messed up because all you've taken on is like gels and a hell of a load of carbs. So I don't really have that big an appetite. It's normally the day after. The day after is just like you really feel the hunger, and anything carbs basically is what I go for.
So after this race, how long will the gap be before the Worlds if you make it?
So this race is a half Ironman. So if I did qualify for Worlds through this race, don't know if I'd take that slot because I want to do the full
Hmm.
distance Worlds. It
Yeah.
depends on when it is. Normally it's the back end of the year. It depends on
Hmm.
when it would be.
Yeah. And then leading up to the race, how many like would you do a full Ironman or are you or is your
No, no,
training
no,
yeah.
not at all. You wouldn't. I mean, you could do like distances close to it. With my run, I wouldn't do any distances close to a marathon. I think that's one people like perception people have that you have to run
Hmm.
so or not even just run, we'll swim, bike and run the distance before you actually do it, which you definitely don't. So my bikes can get pretty long, but I think the bike is also not as straining on well, it's nowhere near straining on the body as running. Running such a high impact sport. And swimming, I mean, more than likely I swim the distance. In the field and time I 3.8 kilometers, so I swim that every like maybe once a week in the swim sessions anyway. Like it's not that's the kind of
Mm.
easier part of it, but the bike definitely will get close to the number. Sometimes we'll cycle more than the full distance, but running nowhere near, like maybe a half marathon at tops.
So which element of it did you find the hardest to train for when you were first getting into competitive Ironman? Was it the swimming or the biking or the running?
The swim. So, like I mentioned, I've always been a runner, but the swim
Hmm.
something I've never done. Like I knew how to swim. Like I can't sit there and be like I didn't know how to swim. I did know how to swim, but I guess nothing I've ever done competitively. And I think now, like when I started it, like I'd be literally doing like 2 lengths of front crawl, and I'd be like, I can't breathe. Like I am so
Mm.
out of breath. My heart rate is so high, but it's like I've run up to marathon, so I'm fit. I know I'm fit. Why can't I swim 2 lengths without like
Yeah.
having to stop to catch my breath? So swim was definitely the most difficult. I honestly think swimming is just a different type of fitness because obviously you're
Mm,
limited to when you can breathe. So that
yeah.
was definitely a very big challenge. For the first few months, I did really struggle, but swimming with a club definitely helps with that. The bike,
Hmm.
I found actually fine. I think cycling is one of those things a little bit easier, and like my dad's a big cyclist too, so I get dragged out and bike with him, which is fine. And then the running, which is second nature, it's something I've done since so young, so I didn't struggle with that at all.
Yeah, I think swimming is definitely the most technical, and that's the biggest part that's hard for people to grasp. But I had a guy on the podcast called Christian Hill, and he did an Ironman, and he couldn't swim one length of the pool before doing it, and then
Oh
he's
my
yeah,
gosh,
and he had signed up for the Ironman, but he just said that it clicked at the right time.
oh,
Um,
that is very lucky.
yeah, and I guess as well because you're not doing the race in a pool, so you don't have a safety net. You can't hold on to the pool side. You have to just go. Um,
And it
yeah,
can
and
be quite
just
brutal as well. Like when there's thousands of
mm,
athletes in the sea or in the loch and you're getting slapped left, right, and centre, like it can be pretty brutal. So if you're not confident in the swim, it's definitely a challenge. So I would say that's definitely the hardest part of the race is the swim.
mm. And to finish off, I'd love to know what would you say to yourself, a few years ago before you were getting into it? Like, what advice would you give to yourself?
This is so basic and so straightforward, but work hard. Just get your head down and
Mm,
work hard. Like it's literally the only way you're gonna get to where you want to be. And it does
yeah,
take a lot of sacrifices, but yeah, I just tell my younger self just to stick in. Anytime you feel like you don't want to do it, just do it.
yeah,
Your
brilliant. Well,
future self
thank
will
you
be
very much,
grateful.
Chloe. All the best for your race in Mallorca.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to talk to you.
No worries. Brilliant. Well,